I'm going to start this video with a question. Is music sometimes better when you don't understand what is happening? We spend a lot of time trying to understand music, whether that's through the technical aspects of putting together a patch with modular, or through music theory and understanding harmony and melody and so on. There are a lot of rules to learn, but sometimes I feel that music is more enjoyable when you don't understand what is going on. And in fact, sometimes music is more enjoyable to listen to when you don't understand what is going on. And so that's what I want to talk about in today's video. Is music better when you don't understand it? Hello and welcome to today's video. So in today's video I want to talk about the idea that music can sometimes be better, both making it and listening to it, when you don't actually understand what's going on. Now that might seem a little bit strange at first, but maybe if you can, try and think back to a period when you first discovered a love of music. Maybe it was like the first band that you got into, or the first artist that you got into. You didn't know anything about how that music was made, and you probably heard it in a different way to the way that you heard it once you knew what was happening. Now, you could say that actually maybe it's not necessarily better, it's just a different way of listening. But if I think back to my early explorations of listening to music and discovering music myself for the first time, a lot of the music that I listened to then, I had no idea how the sounds were made. I had no idea how the music was made, no idea about music theory or anything like that. And I heard the music as a whole. And then later on I started to learn the guitar and I started to learn about music and so on. And the way that I listened to music at that point became very different, because I started hearing the individual parts of the music, and I started hearing what was actually happening in the music, and I started to understand it, and I started to appreciate it from a different perspective. And although that appreciation and that perspective certainly brought me greater understanding and pleasure from listening and playing the music, I never heard the music the same way again as I did when I first discovered the music and didn't really know what was going on. Now, fast forward many years into the future, and I make music, some of which is a little strange to listen to, and some of which I don't always understand what is happening when I make it, but it sounds interesting, and so I just kind of let it be whatever it's going to be. And I think to a certain extent it brings me back to that earlier sort of almost kind of innocent way of listening to music, when you don't always know what's going on and you might be surprised by things. You don't always understand why things are happening or where a sound is coming from, and you can't always recreate it. And that is one of the brilliant things that I love about modular, is that you never quite fully know what's happening. Well, you can do to a certain extent, but you can get surprised. You can get surprises in there quite easily. Now, in this day and age, I think the idea of understanding what you're doing and understanding how you're working is very important, and there might almost be, like you might say, an obsession with it, especially on YouTube, because there are so many videos and so many tutorials and people explaining how things work and explaining how you can create things and so on, and that is all brilliant and it's all very useful, but sometimes I wonder if understanding how things work might sometimes draw away from your creativity, and actually sort of delving into how should we say, going into an area where you don't understand what you're doing and you don't understand how something works might actually benefit you creatively. And so rather than understanding what is happening, I think what is more important is listening to what is happening and listening to the sounds that you're hearing, and being able to identify what you like the sound of and maybe what you don't like the sound of. Now, of course, in order to recreate things, or maybe to recreate, or rather to create intentionally, you might need a certain level of understanding. But I don't always think that that is the most important aspect of creativity with modular. And it's probably true that modular synth attracts the sort of person that likes to understand what is going on and likes to be able to build things from the ground up and create things from scratch, because that's basically what you've got to do. However, you can sometimes be, you can sometimes be sort of clouded by doing things the way that they're meant to be done. But if you don't understand the way that they're meant to be done, or you don't understand why things are happening, then you don't have that restriction, and that can lead you to some very interesting sounds and very interesting places. Now, I'm not saying that you should not. I'm not saying that you should not learn about how things work, and you should not try to learn a bit of theory, because I am, after all, a music teacher, and I spend a lot of time teaching students how to understand music and so on, and it's definitely something which is important. However, I do think that sometimes it's useful to let go, and sometimes it's useful to embrace a certain amount of confusion, because if you're confused about something and you don't understand what's happening, that will lead you to ask questions, and through asking questions you might actually move yourself along the path a little bit further. And also, by not knowing what's going to happen, it kind of keeps you engaged a little bit as well, because you will be surprised. You'll encounter surprises, and you'll encounter those happy accidents and so on, which keeps you going and adds a bit of fuel to your creative fire. And so instead of kind of like designing your music or writing your music, whatever, you're kind of discovering it. You're discovering it for yourself, like you're discovering a new artist, except of course the new artist is you. And of course, this kind of ties into the a previous video where I talked about flow and sort of being in the zone. And one of the requirements for that was a balance of skill and challenge. So it's that balance, it's having something in what you're doing where you don't really understand what's happening that helps you get into that flow zone. And if you fully understood exactly what's happening, then you're less likely to actually achieve that flow state. Because what's happening is that the work becomes predictable and it becomes boring. And I think modular synth kind of fits perfectly in this understandability zone, where you can understand to a certain level, but there's still so much that can happen that you don't really know what's going on. There's another term called correspondence by a writer called Tim Ingold. And correspondence sort of deals with the act of making things and creating things. And his idea, sort of very, very basically, is that quite often as makers or creators, we are working with a material and we are corresponding back and forth between the artist and the material, rather than imposing our ideas and our design onto empty material. And I think this is also something which describes modular synth very well, and the idea of working with modular, in that you're not necessarily always imposing your will onto the modular synth. You have this kind of back and forth whereby you'll do something, the modular synth reacts, you respond to that reaction and listen to what's happening, and then that may influence and change what you're going to do. And so slowly, through the process of exploration and discovery, you create your patch and your sound. And a lot of the time that comes through not really understanding what you're doing and not intentionally doing things, but just exploring and finding your way. And in some ways you can kind of let the patch that you're creating lead you in the direction that the music is going to go, rather than trying to impose a direction. And I often find that the most satisfying results that I have when working with modular are not when I've tried to very rigidly do something, but when I've just kind of let things happen and let the modular sort of almost kind of guide what's happening by listening to the sound. And you know, also those times when I don't have that sort of flow experience, usually that's because I'm too tightly or rigidly trying to achieve a very specific thing. And if I kind of let go of any intentions or goals, and let go of any understanding that I might have, that's when the sort of magic happens. And also sometimes it's nice to know that even if something happens and it sounds really interesting, you don't always have to try and recreate that on another occasion. Sometimes just the magic of something just happening once is enough. And if you tried to recreate that and you tried to repeat it over and over again, it would lose its sort of magical quality, and it would just become another thing that you can do. In the same way, you don't always need to understand every single function of a module in order to get the best out of it. And sometimes just kind of messing around and tinkering with things is actually the most fun part of playing with modular. And so I say that not knowing something is not necessarily a flaw. It could even be sort of, you know, like an artistic superpower, if you want to think of it that way. And again, I say this, you know, I'm not trying to say that you should never try and learn things, you should never try and understand things, because understanding definitely has its place. But there needs to be a balance, and sometimes you need to let go of the understanding and let go of trying to force things in order to let the mystery and the magic break through. You know, you can just kind of let sound surprise you. Let your tools misbehave, let the modular misbehave, let the music teach you what needs to happen and what you need to know. You know, I'd probably say that, you know, music doesn't always need to be understood. It needs to be felt. And that's probably the most important thing. And sometimes in order to feel what is happening, you need to sort of get out of the way and let the understanding get out of the way. So I hope you found that interesting. Maybe next time you're patching something, try to put yourself in a position where you don't know what is going to happen, and you don't understand what is happening. Or if you've had, you know, moments like that in the past where you've had a really interesting experience or made a really cool sound, but you don't really understand what happened, let me know about that in the comments as well. Have you had moments where not understanding has actually led you to some kind of amazing discovery? Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Hope you found it interesting, and of course, as ever, please hit the like button, hit subscribe and all that malarkey, and I will see you in the next video. Cheerio.